Have you ever been perfectly happy with your progress until you saw how far somebody else had gone? And have you ever looked at someone roughly your own age and thought, I should be further ahead by now? And have you ever opened social media feeling absolutely fine, only to close it 10 minutes later feeling as though somehow your life wasn't enough? If you've experienced any of those, there's nothing unusual about it. But there is something you need to understand about it, because comparison can quietly steal something far more valuable than your confidence. It can steal your direction. Today, I want to talk about something almost all of us do, but very few of us admit. We compare our success, our income, our relationships, our careers, our business, even our happiness. And today, with social media putting everybody else's life in the palm of our hand, we've probably never had more opportunities to look at somebody else and quietly wonder, why am I not there yet? But before we get into that, let me briefly take you back to our last masterclass. In that, we talked about the voice that's been holding you back, that conversation going on inside your head, the things you repeatedly tell yourself, the doubts, the criticism, the conclusions you make about who you are and what you're capable of. But there's something I deliberately didn't go deeply into during that lesson, because sometimes that negative voice doesn't start with you. Sometimes it starts when you look at someone else. You see what they're doing, where they're living, what they're earning, and what they've achieved. And suddenly the conversation inside your head changes. And that's where we're going to go today. So during this masterclass, I'm not going to tell you simply to stop comparing yourself. You may well have heard that 100,000 times or more already, and it's not particularly useful. Instead, I want to show you why we compare, why comparison sometimes can actually be useful, why it becomes dangerous, and most importantly, how to look at another person's success without allowing their success to become evidence of your failure. Because somebody else's chapter 20 in their life should never convince you that there's something wrong with, say, your chapter 5. I've been thinking about this in relation to my own life, and when I look back, I've had several different chapters. I grew up in Liverpool. School wasn't exactly where I discovered my confidence. But then music came into my life. And by 13, I was working as a musician and getting paid for it. Now imagine that for a moment. You're 13 years of age. You're surrounded by musicians, most that are a lot older than yourself. Most are considerably better than you. Most have more experience. Some can do things with an instrument that you haven't learned yet. And you could look at that in two completely different ways. You could think, I'll never be as good as them. Or you could think, if they can do that, maybe I can learn to do it too. Same comparison, completely different results. And as you guess, I didn't understand that psychology of any of this at 13. I certainly wasn't sitting there thinking, that's an interesting psychological response to an upward social comparison. I was just a snotty-nosed kid from Liverpool who loved music. But I learned something through music that has stayed with me for the rest of my life. I learned that you can admire someone without putting yourself down. And I feel that that's an important distinction, because years later, when I moved into real estate, I saw a comparison all over again. There were people producing more numbers than a darn tape measure, and I certainly wasn't one of them producing that number. People who appeared to know exactly what they were doing. And once again, I had a choice. I could resent them. I could feel intimidated by them, which I could at times. I could decide they had something I didn't have. Or I could study them. I could study what they were doing differently. How they were speaking to people. How they were following up. What questions were they asking that I could learn? And that distinction eventually became enormously important in my life, because comparison itself isn't necessarily the enemy. What matters is what you do with the information. But something has changed dramatically since those days. When I wanted to compare myself with other musicians, I had to actually meet other musicians. When I wanted to see what other real estate salespeople were doing, I had to work alongside them. Today, you can compare yourself with several thousand people before breakfast. Pick up your phone and within minutes, You can find somebody younger than you, richer than you, fitter than you, living in a bigger house, driving a better car, running a larger business, taking another holiday, celebrating another anniversary, launching another project, getting another promotion. Oh, God. And here's the problem. You're comparing the full reality of your life with the edited highlights of theirs. You know about the argument you had yesterday. You know about the bill sitting on your desk. You know about the business idea that maybe didn't work. You know about the mistakes that you've made. You know about the things that frighten you at 3 o'clock in the morning. But you don't know those things about the person on your screen. You're seeing what they chose to show you. And yet, you're using that tiny piece of information to judge your entire life. I mean, really, think about how unfair that is being to yourself. There's another problem with comparison. It creates an invisible finish line. You may have been doing extremely well. Maybe your business grew 20%. Maybe you lost 10 pounds. Maybe you finally started writing that book. Maybe you saved your first $5,000. Maybe you made a difficult change in your life that took enormous courage. That should feel like progress. But then you discover somebody else grew their business by 100%. Somebody lost 30 pounds, and somebody already published 5 darn books, and never mind the 5,000 you managed to squirrel away. You see somebody has $1 million invested, and suddenly your achievement shrinks. But nothing actually changed. Your business didn't become smaller. The 10 pounds didn't just jump back onto your body. The book didn't disappear. The money didn't vanish from your account. At least I hope it didn't. The only thing that changed was the measuring stick. And this is where comparison becomes dangerous, because eventually you can become incapable of enjoying anything that you've achieved. There will always be someone with more, always somebody further ahead, always somebody younger, always somebody faster, always somebody receiving more attention. If your happiness depends upon being ahead of everyone else, you're entering a race, believe me, that nobody has ever won. If this is you, then think about whose life have you been using as a measuring stick for your own. Maybe it's somebody you know. Maybe it's your brother or your sister, a friend, a colleague, someone in your industry. Maybe it's someone online that you've never even met. Now, ask yourself something maybe a little more difficult. Why did you choose their finish line? Who decided that because they achieved something by, say, 30, you should have achieved it by 30? Who decided because their business grew quickly, yours should grow at exactly the same speed? Who decided their marriage, their income, their house, their body, their career, or their definition of success should become the standard by which you judge yourself? Perhaps, without realizing it, you've been running very hard towards a finish line that you never actually chose. And in the next few minutes, we're going to take this much deeper, because there is one form of comparison that can actually make you better, and another that can slowly make you abandon the person you were trying to become in the first place. Understanding the difference can change everything. So, what is the difference? When does comparison help you? And when does it begin hurting you? I believe it comes down to one very simple distinction. Are you comparing to learn, or are you comparing to judge? Because those two are completely different things. And I've written a free PDF on this, and I'll give you some information on that shortly. Let me give you an example. Let's say you meet somebody who's built a successful business. They're doing extremely well. They're earning considerably more than you. They have a great team around them. Their business appears to be really growing. Now, you could look at that person and think, why can't I do that? What's wrong with me? I've been doing this just as long as they have. They must have had advantages I didn't have. And notice what's happening. You're no longer studying their success. You're using their success to basically self-sabotage yourself. I've taken somebody else's achievement and turned it into evidence against you. But what if you looked at exactly the same person and asked, what are they doing that I could learn from? What decisions did they make? What skills did they develop? What mistakes did they avoid? What are they doing consistently that perhaps I'm not? Now, comparison has become useful. You're not actually putting them on a pedestal. You're not putting yourself underneath them. You're gathering information. That's an enormous difference. One form of comparison says, look how much better they are than me. And the other says, there's something here I can learn. And here's a question I think we should ask ourselves more often. When you see somebody succeeding, do you feel inspired or diminished? Because that reaction tells you something. Maybe somebody buys the house you've always wanted, gets the promotion, builds the company, loses the weight, finds the relationship, travels the world, and for a split second, you feel that little sting. I mean, come on, we're all human. We've all felt it. You smile, you congratulate them, but somewhere underneath, there's a quiet thought. Why isn't this happening for me? I don't think we need to pretend that feeling doesn't exist, but we do need to decide what happens next, because you can turn that moment into resentment, or you can turn it into curiosity. You can say, their success is making me uncomfortable. Why? Maybe it's showing you something you genuinely want. Maybe you've been procrastinating, putting things off for far too long. Maybe you've been playing too safely. Maybe you've been saying something matters to you, but your actions haven't really reflected it. In that case, the discomfort isn't necessarily bad. It may be information you actually need. But in my experience, here's where people make another mistake. They see somebody else's results and immediately want to copy what that person is doing. I know this because I've been there. I've learned that that can be dangerous too. Why? Because you don't know the whole story. You don't know what it cost them. You don't know how long it took. You don't know what advantages they started with, and you don't know what sacrifices they made. And most importantly, you don't know whether you actually want their life. That's worth thinking about. We often envy pieces of people's lives without asking whether we'd accept the entire package. You might envy somebody's business, but would you want their working hours? You might envy somebody's income, but would you want the pressure that comes with it? You might envy somebody's public profile, but would you want to surrender the privacy that they surrendered? You might envy somebody's freedom without seeing the 20 years of discipline that created it. So be careful. Don't simply copy somebody's result. Study the process that produced it. Then decide whether that process actually belongs in your life. I saw this very clearly during my years in sales as well as music. There were always top producers. And when you're ambitious, you notice them. You notice the numbers, you notice the commissions, you notice the recognition. But I discovered that simply wanting somebody else's numbers didn't make me better. What helped me was studying what happened before those numbers actually appeared. How many calls were they making? How were they preparing? How did they speak with the prospective clients? How did they respond when somebody else said no? How quickly did they follow up? That's where the education was. And that principle has followed me since I discovered this many years ago. I don't become hypnotized by the scoreboard. Study how the points got into the board first, because the scoreboard is the end of the story. The habits, the decisions, the work, the failures, the adjustments, those are the chapters nobody sees. And those are usually where the lessons are. Now, let me turn this around, because there's another person I think you should compare yourself with. Someone whose circumstances you understand completely. Someone whose advantages you know, whose disadvantages you know, whose mistakes you know, whose fears you know, whose opportunities you know, and whose entire history you know. It's you, not the person you were 20 years ago, not even 5 years ago. You yesterday. That's a comparison that can actually tell you something. Am I slightly better today than I was yesterday? Did you keep the promise you made to yourself? Did you learn something? Did you take one step? Did you handle something better? Did you make the phone call? Did you have the conversation? Did you do the thing you'd been putting off? That's a fair comparison, because now you're comparing like with like. And maybe that's something we need more of today. Our own scoreboard, not Instagram's scoreboard, not your neighbours, not your brother-in-law's, not the person you went to school with, but yours. What does success actually mean to you? And again, in my experience, that's not as easy as a question as it sounds. Because sometimes we chase things simply because we've been told they're worth chasing. More money, a bigger house, more impressive title, more followers, more recognition. Now, don't get me wrong, there's absolutely nothing wrong with any of those things if you actually want them. But there's a big difference between pursuing something because it matters to you and pursuing it because you don't want to feel behind. I feel one is ambition, the other is comparison, wearing ambition's clothes. And there's another reason comparison becomes exhausting. The target keeps moving. And I know this personally. Suppose you earn 50,000 a year and you think, if I could just make 100,000, I'd feel successful. Then you make 100,000. Great. But now you're spending time around people making 250,000. Suddenly 100,000 doesn't feel quite as impressive. Eventually, you're around people making 1 million. And once again, you're behind. The same thing can happen with houses, cars, businesses, followers, status, even personal development. You can spend your entire life moving the finish line and never once stop long enough to appreciate how far you've already traveled. I don't know about you, but to me, that's not ambition. That's total exhaustion. And as I've grown older, I've come to appreciate this more. I've had several careers. As you know, I've been a musician playing all over the world. I've worked in sales. I've worked in property management. I've built businesses. I've studied personal development. I've had the opportunity to learn from people such as Bob Proctor, Jack Canfield, T. Harv Eker, Tony Robbins, as well as many others who influenced the way I think. And if I compared my journey with any one of those, I'd lose something incredibly important. I wasn't supposed to become Bob Proctor. I wasn't supposed to become Jack Canfield. I wasn't supposed to become Tony Robbins, etc. I was supposed to learn what I could. Take the principles that prove themselves, combine them with decades of my own experiences, my successes, my failures, my mistakes, my disappointments, and there were many, believe me, my lessons, and become John Williams. And I believe the same thing applies to you. You don't need somebody else's life. You need to discover what's possible with yours. So here's the distinction I want you to remember. When you look at somebody else's who's ahead of you, don't ask, what does their success say about me? Ask, what can their success teach me? Take the lesson, leave the judgment, take the inspiration, leave the inadequacy. Take what helps you grow and leave behind anything that makes you forget the value of your own journey. Because there will always be someone ahead of you. There will always be somebody behind you, but neither of them is walking your road. I'm going to give you a simple exercise and a 7-day challenge for free that I believe could completely change the way you respond the next time somebody else's success appears on your screen. Because the goal isn't to stop noticing other people's lives, it's to stop losing sight of your own. So, now let's bring this back to you, because it's very easy to listen to something like this, nod your head, agree with it, and then tomorrow morning, you pick up your phone, see somebody doing extraordinarily well, and immediately start comparing again. So I want to give you something practical, something you can actually use, and that's why I've created a short 2-page PDF that I want you to download from the link below this video. It's called your 7-day comparison reset. It will show you what scoreboard I am using. In it, you can see who you compare yourself with most often. Maybe it's somebody in your business, a friend, a family member, someone you follow online, someone from your past. It will show you what exactly you are comparing, whether it be income, career, business, appearance, relationship, lifestyle, recognition, success. By using this short PDF, you'll be able to ask yourself, do I actually want what they have, or do I simply want the feeling I imagine it gives them? That's a very different question. Maybe you don't really want the enormous business. Maybe what you want is freedom. Maybe you don't really want the 1 million followers. Maybe what you want is significance. Maybe you don't really want the huge house. Maybe what you want is security. Maybe you don't really want somebody else's career. Maybe what you want is to feel that you're doing something meaningful with your own. Sometimes the thing that we're comparing isn't the thing we actually want. We're chasing the feeling we believe is attached to it. After using this PDF, it will make you ask, what would a successful life look like for me? Not Instagram, not society, not your friends, not your family, you. What would make you wake up in the morning and think, this is a good life? Because you may discover you've been running towards goals you never consciously chose. And that, my friend, is your 7-day challenge. And as I said, I'm calling this one the 7-day comparison reset. In it, you'll have the amazing stop, study, return method explained. Download the free PDF in the link below this video, answer the questions in the PDF, And I'd be very interested to know what happens, because I suspect you'll begin noticing just how much mental energy you've been giving away. And there's something else I want you to say, because somebody watching this right now needs to hear it. You're not late. You're not behind because somebody else got there first. There's no universal timetable for success. Some people find their direction at 20, some at 40, some at 60, some completely reinvent themselves much later than that. And I know something about reinvention. My life certainly hasn't travelled in a straight line. Liverpool, music, sales, property management, business, personal development, teaching. There were times when I couldn't possibly have predicted where the next chapter would take me. And I'm glad I couldn't, because some of the experiences that might have looked completely disconnected at that time eventually became part of what I do today. The years as a musician taught me things. Sales taught me things. Property management taught me things. Business taught me things. Success taught me things. And believe me, failure taught me things. And believe me, there's been plenty of failure throughout my life. You don't always see how the pieces fit together. Sometimes you only understand that looking backwards. That's why I think comparison creates another problem we don't talk about enough. It makes us impatient with our own lives. We see somebody else succeeding, and suddenly we want to skip chapters. We want the result now. We want the business now. We want the money now. We want the relationship now. We want the recognition now. And I know, especially when you can master the law of attraction, you can have all this extremely fast. But some things do simply take time, like mastering the law of attraction, which I'll probably start a series on that next time. So as I was saying, we see somebody else succeeding and suddenly we want to skip chapters. We want the result now. We want the business now. We want the money now. We want the relationship now. We want the recognition now. There's nothing glamorous about that. It's not going to make a very exciting social media post, but it's true. Skill takes time, trust takes time, relationships take time, businesses take time. Wisdom certainly takes time, and sometimes the person you're comparing yourself with simply started before you did. That doesn't make them better, it just makes them earlier. There's a difference. So perhaps today you can give yourself permission to stop racing somebody who doesn't even know they're in a race with you. Think about that for a minute. The person you're desperately trying to catch may not even know you're competing. And while you've been watching their lane, who's been watching yours? There is a life sitting directly in front of you. People who matter, opportunities you've overlooked, abilities you've underestimated, experience you haven't actually appreciated, progress you haven't celebrated because you've been looking sideways. Maybe it's time to look forward again, because someone else's success doesn't take anything away from you. Someone else's opportunity doesn't mean you've missed yours. Someone else's moment doesn't mean your moment isn't coming. Celebrate them, learn from them, be inspired by them. But then get back to your own life, because that's the only one you've been given to live. This has been a little long today, but if anything in this masterclass made you think about comparison differently, I'd love you to do something. In the comments below, finish this sentence for me. My definition of success is, not somebody else's definition, yours. I'd really like to read what you write. And if you know somebody else who's consistently feeling behind, send them this masterclass. It may be exactly what they need to hear today. And if you're enjoying the John Williams Global Masterclass series, do me a favor and subscribe to the channel and join me for the next one. Plus, download the free PDF. You can also visit johnwilliamsglobal.com and take a look at the no-cost resources I've created to help you continue this work beyond these videos. Yes, the resources are all free to you. Just put in your best email and I'll rush them to your mailbox. Now, as for where we go next, I'm deliberately going to leave that open because we've covered a tremendous amount throughout this chapter of the Masterclass series. And before we simply rush into another subject, I want to make sure the next direction we take is one that's generally worth taking. Not another version of something we've already discussed. Something that moves us forward. So I'll be thinking very carefully about where we go from here, and I hope you'll join me when we do. In fact, if there's some topic that you're having a problem with, let me know, and we can discover that together on a video for you on this channel. Here's my final thought. Comparison asks, why am I not where they are? I believe a better question is, am I becoming better at living the life that's mine? Because success isn't about arriving before someone else. It's about being able to look at the direction you're traveling and know, this is my road. I chose it. I'm moving forward. Thank you for spending this time with me. Remember, learn from people, be inspired by people, celebrate people, but never become so fascinated by someone else's journey that you forget to live your own. Until next time, keep growing, keep moving forward, and most importantly, keep becoming the person you know you're capable of becoming. This is John Williams reminding you that your vision, your beliefs, and your emotions are shaping your future right now. Choose wisely, live abundantly, keep dreaming big, and I'll see you next time on the John Williams Global Masterclass series. Take care.